Okay, guys, so before I get into this episode, I gotta tell you guys about this amazing app that I found for podcasters. If you are interested in podcasting, never had a podcast before, know nothing about podcasting, I'm telling you, you want to download this app. It's called the Anchor app. Now, the Anchor app has literally everything you could ever need to build your podcast for absolutely $0. I am not joking. It's literally what I use to record my podcast every week. If you are at all interested in getting into the game, you want resources, you want to be able to record with friends, you want to be able to have all the things that you need basically as a starter kit, you want to download this app. Just go to anchor.fm and get started. Guys, you're going to thank me later, I'm telling you. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the All Black Matters podcast. I'm your girl, Rivka, and you know how we do here. We talk about everything culture related. I am here again with another episode. Today, you guys, I'm going to kind of talk about friendships. I want to talk about friendships today. I have a bit to say about friendships, at least from my personal experience anyway. That's what we're going to get into today. Stay tuned. Hey, come through, just you or your crew. I just want to tell you about some news you can use. It's the All Black Matters podcast. Hey. Okay, let me first start off by saying I got the idea to talk about friendships from Insecure. I think we've all been watching the evolution of the relationship between Molly and Issa and kind of like seeing ourselves in the characters and, siding with who we side with. Insecure has so many stans and so many fans and, people who have favorites and etc. So I think that just watching how the trajectory of the relationship between Molly and Issa has played out has been really interesting to me. And it's so reminiscent of so many, relationships that I've had in my life. And I thought it would be really interesting to kind of like assess that a little bit more and kind of like talk about stuff. And like, I think for all of us together to kind of like think about things in a way that we probably haven't. So, that's where this idea came from. So one of the first things that come to mind when you think about friendships, right, is like, how did you guys meet? Like, what is the foundation of this friendship? What did you guys kind of like come together? Like, what was the moment that you guys bonded over, et cetera, et cetera? I think that that's something that I think so often we get into friendships and relationships and we don't think about what the foundation of the friendship is. And sometimes it can get so like, things can escalate so quickly and now you guys are hanging out all the time or now you guys are just going everywhere together and et cetera. Now you're flying out of the country together, et cetera. And you kind of don't have that foundation as to like, how did we even get this close? And sometimes, and the complete opposite side of things, it happens so organically that there is like, how did we meet? Like, there's that moment like where it's like, oh shit, like, I don't even remember how we really met for real, like, or how we really got this close. You know what I mean? So I think that's something that is worth thinking about though, because at least for me in my experience, I noticed that the friendships that I feel like are the most strained or I feel like I've had the most issues or like had to work the most on are friendships, or like, I guess are forced, if we want to be honest, are the friendships that I felt like were always that from the beginning. So when we first met, it was like, almost like we had to put puzzle pieces together for us to work. I don't know if that makes sense. So for example, I have friends that we are close and we have been close almost like instantly. And the way that we met was almost by accident. So it's kind of like we were just in the same room one day and we so happened to kind of like, speak about one topic and then we, clicked on that. And now we're like, hitting it off and stuff like that. And it was kind of like organic. Like we didn't even think, we weren't trying to be friends, if that makes sense. Then I have other friendships where I felt like from the start, it was like this person either was trying to insert themselves into an area that I was in, or I was inserting myself into an area where they were in. And it wasn't ever supposed to work, if that makes sense. It wasn't ever like a naturally like we connect on something. And that's where our foundation started. It was more so like, we should be friends because we have the same friend group, or we should be friends because we have this, thing that we're supposed to regard highly, or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? So I I think that it's an interesting question to ask how your friendship started, because I think it does, factor into how, the relationship plays out years down the line, if it lasts that long, or, in the future, because a lot of times when it's hard at the start, it'll be hard throughout. You know what I mean? I've noticed that anyway, at least in my experience. And the friendships that, like I said, that are kind of more easy and like, kind of go with the flow, and we just naturally like get along. And when we have issues, it naturally is something that we can get past. It's because we kind of never had to force it. I think a really good example of this would be like, you ever been at work, right? And you're in the office and you have a team that you work with, right? So let's say you have like 3 people that's a part of your team. You got a real small team. And because you guys just happen to be around each other every day and you are like forced to work together, you start talking, you kind of start talking about different topics. And, next thing you know, your coworkers are asking you to go out for drinks with them after work. And next thing you know, that turns into, going to like their kid's baby shower or whatever the case may be. Now, you ever notice that eventually those either die out a lot of the time, or they just feel strained after a while? Like you feel like you have to force yourself to go to things. It's because it wasn't natural. It's because you guys kind of were in the same situation, in the same place, around the same people, and you had that thing in common, but not really anything that you cared about truly, if that makes sense. Now, on the flip side, it could be that you make your best friend at work. But a lot of times it happens the opposite way around, because there's nothing that you guys have that you both are passionate about that connected you. It's more so, or something that you both have genuine interest in. It's just kind of like, we happen to work together, we have this job, okay, you know what I mean? And usually those friendships don't really last too long, at least not on a close best friend or like really, you know what I mean? That kind of vibe. And that's one thing I'm noticing when it comes to the friendships that I've had. Because, I've had so many ups and downs when it comes to like people that I've considered to be close to me, people that I regard very highly and like hold to kind of like a higher standard than like the average associates and things that I've had around me. And I've noticed that a lot of the fallouts, because I recently went through a breakup with one of my friends, and I kind of had to think about it, like, how did we even start becoming this close? And when I really like peeped it, it was like, we had issues from the start. Like we kind of didn't get each other from the very beginning because of how we became friends, So I think it's just really interesting, because it's like it always kind of ties in to something that you would have a fight about, for instance, I think anyway, at least in my experience. So I think it's something that's worth paying attention to, and just don't force friendships, like don't force it. Another thing I really think is interesting, like when considering friendships, is like to ask, why are you guys still friends? Like, let's say you've been friends with someone for like 6-7 years, and you guys have just, you kind of hang out, you see each other, it's just, at this point, it's just the norm that you guys have been friends for so long, I think sometimes when it's been a long time, we kind of don't think about what we give each other. You know what I mean? Like if it's been like so many years, you're just like, that's just my friend and we just gonna be friends forever. But like, you don't think about the quality of the friendship. And I think that that's something that's really interesting, because if we look at Molly and Issa, that definitely is something that, is a huge part of their demise, like a part of the demise in the friendship anyway, is that like they were just friends and kept being friends. And like, even when they had issues about certain things, rather than really taking the time to address and deal with those things in a way that would be respectful for both of them, they kind of just was like, okay, you know what? They assumed, it's like Molly's thinking like, well, Issa's like this, and Issa's thinking, well, Molly's like this, and maybe if we do it like this, or you just you take each other for granted after a while, because it's like, you've been friends for so long, you kind of feel like, well, I know this person and I know that she'll be okay with this. Or even if you don't think of it that way, you just kind of keep going through the motions rather than taking the time to kind of like have the conversations that are tough, work out the kinks in the friendship, and even evaluate like, why are we even still friends? Like, have we evolved to a place where we no longer, kind of suit each other? Like we no longer kind of like work together as friends. We no longer, support each other in the way that we should. We no longer, are there for each other in the way that, the other person might need, or, you know what I mean? Or maybe we just have different interests now, and maybe we just don't see the same things as fun or the same things as interesting, all of these things, I think that especially when you've been friends with someone for a really long time, you don't really take the time to evaluate. I could say, oh, I just had a relationship that one of my close friends and I kind of like stopped talking, and now I don't think we're ever going to be friends in that way ever again. And it's because of things like this. Like, I feel like I had to think to myself, like, we've been friends for a really long time, and this last issue that we had, I feel like it should not even have been a issue, you know? And the fact that we had this fight and it went the way that it did shows me that we don't have the same agenda. You know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes it takes certain instances to kind of show you that. Similarly with, like, you know, Molly and Issa, where it's like, this thing is kind of like a deal breaker. You know what I mean? Like, this, you know, it should not have gone that way. And now I know that we probably just don't work well together. Like, we just probably don't match up well. And it's not to say anything is like, you know, that I hate you or that, like, you know, we can never be cordial to one another. I just think that, you know, when you assess your friendships and you kind of like take the time to think about all of the factors and like what kind of ties you together versus what doesn't, you know, sometimes I think going through that process, although it's difficult, it definitely shows you a lot about yourself and about the people that you allow to be around you and that you have been allowing to be around you. Because it's like, you know, I had to think about this last friendship. You know, one part of it was, yeah, like this last like blowout that we had should not have even been a thing. Like, it should not have even went the way that it did, but it did. And it showed me that this person doesn't really value or know me well enough. You know, like, even though we've been friends for a really long time, they don't really have a full understanding of who I am as a person, and nor do they respect and appreciate that, because if they did, this wouldn't have been a issue, you know? And I think vice versa for me, I think I've allowed that. Like, I've allowed this individual to kind of be the kind of friend to me that I wasn't satisfied with fully. And I let that happen because I valued what she could be. You know what I mean? So that's another thing. Like, you see people's potential and you see how they're growing and you see how they're evolving. And rather than giving yourself, you know, kind of like the benefit of having something that you need, you kind of like are waiting for that person to get there, if that makes sense. I don't know if that really makes sense, but that's kind of how I felt like with this last situation. And I think that when I thought about it, when I truly analyzed, like, why are we still friends? Like, the things that I feel like I've deposited into this relationship isn't what I've been getting out of it. So what is the benefit for both of us? You know, like, there can be a benefit for one party, but if it's not beneficial for both of us, for instance, if you're not supporting me in the way that I support you, or, you know, I feel like you're not showing up for me in the way that I show up for you, where's the balance there, you know? And I think this can be considered on both ends too, because considering this last breakup that I had, the other person could probably say the same. Like, I feel like you probably weren't giving me what I wanted in a friendship. And I think that's even more of a reason for, you know, us to probably part ways, because at least we look at it, you know, from the perspective of Issa and Molly, and we can see that, like, they're clearly on different paths, like, you know what I mean, when it comes to the way that they see the world and the way that they interact with one another and even other people around them. You know, we can see that they just do things a lot differently. And I think while their blowout was quite toxic, you know, and the fact that, you know, words were said and things were thrown in faces and all of that stuff, and that's not really what we want. You know, that's not really, I feel like, the most healthy way to deal with things. Sometimes it has to be that for you to kind of see, you know, what's real. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm not really necessarily on anybody's side when it comes to Molly and Issa, but I just I thought it was interesting to kind of see the dynamic play out like that, because it just reminded me so much of the people that I have around me. And like, it reminded me more so to constantly be evaluating, which I do anyway, because child, this girl, listen, being my friend is kind of a lot. I'm not gonna hold you, because I be evaluating everything. Like, I'm hella analytical and I'm always evaluating something, but mainly it's just myself, to be honest. But, yeah, I think that this kind of like was another thing that I took into, you know, analysis or evaluation, where I was like, wow, so we've been friends for X amount of years. Like, what is the thing that really holds us together? Like, how come we're still friends, you know? And when I thought about it, at least from a lot of my friendships, not just the one that, you know, just disintegrated, but like other friendships that I've had, it's like, the people that I feel like I connect with the easiest, it doesn't feel like I'm working so hard, like at the friendship. So for instance, now this doesn't mean that like you're not going to feel like there's issues within the friendship, or that there's things that need to be fixed, or there's things that, need to be worked on. But I look at like the people that I kind of naturally connected with, and it wasn't forced, and we didn't have to have like a discussion on like, this is how our friendship needs to go if we're going to be friends, and et cetera, from the very start. And I mean, very, very start. I see that when we have issues, it's a lot easier for us to deal with that. You know what I mean? It's like if we have an issue, it's not, a huge hurdle in our friendship. It's almost like organically fixed. Yes, we sit, we talk about it. Yes, we, have our opinions. We may not agree on things, we may even butt heads. But I think that in the friendships that I've realized that kind of just happened naturally, it's a lot easier of a process to get over. Whereas the friendships that I've had that, I had to kind of like position myself in a way for us to be friends, or, force it, I feel like those friendships kind of disintegrate, and like the issues that we have are a lot larger. And that's probably just subconsciously because I know that this was something that I had to put more work into, or like, like that just didn't seem natural to me. And I feel like it's just something to be said about that. I don't really know. I can't necessarily say that I think that's right or wrong, but I think for me personally, I'm realizing and I'm noticing that like I prefer not to have those kind of friendships. So another really important factor in a friendship to me is, the exchange between the two of you, or like however many friends you have. I think that just having friends that, you have fun with, that's great. But I think it's more important, at least for me, to have friends, especially now that I'm getting older, that like we can uplift each other, that it's a balance there. There's a balance in us uplifting each other, us supporting each other, that we know that if no one else is coming to the thing that we're starting, it's, my best friend is coming, or like my close friend is coming. Or, if I have something that I'm working on, I know that this person is going to be there to support, or and vice versa, that reciprocity is there. And I think that that's something that, I've started to take more notice of in my friendships. I would say that that's something that I value a lot, but I realize that in my friendships, I haven't been super consistent in kind of like holding my friends accountable in that way. Not all of them, obviously. I don't have a whole heap of friends, so I have a very small circle. So I noticed that in one of the friendships that I had, or two of them, I should say, I didn't feel like those people supported me the way that I kind of supported them. I feel like anything that they had, or whenever they were doing something, if I was not working, I was there, like if I needed to where like I would help them, plan it, or help them put things together if it was an event, you know what I mean? So I find that for me, I'm just naturally that way. Like I like helping, and I like being a part of things. I love supporting people. Like that's a natural thing for me. And I find that when I've, in return started something, or like, had interest in something, I find that the level of support wasn't the same, and that's something that like really bothered me about our friendship, because I felt like, that's an imbalance, the exchange is not equal. So for me, and this is not everyone, obviously, like some people don't necessarily think that this is a big deal, but for me, I've noticed about myself that is huge for me. Like that's something that, even if I'm not necessarily talking about it all the time, that I think of as really important. And like, I think in the case that I've just mentioned, I've definitely spoken to them and said, whatever I felt. But I just think it's interesting for us to think about in friendships, because I think a lot of times when you meet someone and you kind of like end up being close to them, or, whatever the case may be, you guys hang out a lot, and you develop a friendship, it happens sometimes so quickly, or sometimes so like seamlessly, that you don't think about what you're getting and what you're giving. And I think the opposite can be said as well, where it's like, it's so evident from the beginning that you kind of ignore it, It's just the little things, like if you have a friend, for instance, that every time you dress nice, or you feel like you look good, they're never like supportive of that, or they have something shady to say, or they can't just be like, you look good, girl. Like, sis, you out here, fucking shit up because you look the fuck good. If they can't say that to you, then that's not really a good friendship, the exchange, especially if you're the kind of friend who is constantly like, sis, you cute. All right, I see you, whatever. you have to be able to see that like that's an imbalance there, and it's probably going to show up in other places. People don't really think, I think a lot of times, that little things like that will lead to something else, but it's always the things that you don't necessarily think about that go deeper, you know? Even between Molly and Issa, you know, there are times where Molly felt like Issa wasn't truly giving her the same kind of, you know, friendship or support that, you know, she was giving Issa, and vice versa. Issa felt the same way. So it's like being able to kind of acknowledge that and know that that's probably a sign that the friendship is a lot different and probably needs to be reevaluated, because it's not helpful to kind of be in a relationship with anyone where you feel drained, where you feel like you're giving more than you're getting, because then it becomes a chore. You know, I just wanted to kind of like talk to you guys about some things that I've noticed, because again, like I said, I just recently had probably one of the bigger breakups in my like from my friendships and my friend group, because these people were, I believe them to be super close to me. And the fact that that kind of like died out made me think about how I evaluate friendships, you know, made me think about how I think of people who are close to me, who are around me. You know, I realized that there are certain things that I need or want in a friendship that may not be the same as everyone else. And that is absolutely fine. You just have to kind of know who values the things that you value. You know, it's kind of like when you're in a relationship with, you know, a significant other. It's kind of like everybody might not put up with what he do or what she does, but you might, because you value that person. And it's not necessarily to say that, you know, that person should be disrespecting you or anything like that. It's just that everyone has their, like the ingredients that makes the soup good for them, if that makes sense. Like, you know, like it may not work for one person, but it might work for someone else. And you just have to kind of know, especially when you've had a friendship or a relationship for a really long time, what works and what doesn't, and not be so passive to where you're just allowing things to be, you know, just allowing things to be without fully thinking about it or fully analyzing it, because then it just becomes toxic, you know? I hope that you guys can take something from that, from my little like spiel. I hope that you do, because I think that as I learn and as I, you know, experience certain things, I want to be able to share it with the people that listen and the people that are here with me and my homies and stuff like that, because I feel like we could all learn together, child. And if y'all got something to help me with, you could definitely let me know, because I think it's just something that it's like growing pains, right? Like I was going to say prains. It's growing pains. It's like, it's one of those things where sometimes you got to go through it to kind of know it. But other times, you know, you learn from other people's experiences. And I hope that for the people that are listening, you know, that you guys are able to kind of like think about these things as you continue to have friendships, because sometimes friendships can hurt. Like when you break up with a friend, it can hurt a lot more than, you know, when you have a relationship with a significant other, because you just don't expect it. You know what I mean? It just kind of comes out of nowhere. So if I can help you guys through, you know, the things that I've been through, and if you want to know details, chat, I mean, I could give y'all details, but obviously not too much, because I'm not trying to really expose nobody. But it's just been it's been a lot, chat. I didn't seen and experienced a couple things, chat. But yeah, like I just kind of wanted to touch on the friendships a bit. I didn't want to go too heavy into it, because I think that it can be such a broad topic that you can think about in so many different ways. But I just wanted to kind of like pose those questions for you guys to kind of think about, you know, what are your friendships like? You know, like what have you really thought about who your friends are and why you're friends with these people and what you gain or what you give in these friendships? Those are really important questions. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of the All Black Matters podcast. You know, we do this every week. Tune in again next week for another episode, and have a fantabulous week.